We're going to start on cinema therapy. We're talking about cinema therapy. When we're talking about cinema therapy, I'm not saying you have to become a cinema therapist. I'm saying that people utilize videos. They watch things on their phones. They watch things on their tablets. They watch television. They go to movies. If we can guide them in some of their watching so that they focus on select characters, select attributes of those characters, what happens in the movie, then possibly we can augment what we're trying to tell our clients. It's not a bad idea if we can focus on um, helping our clients through what they're going to do anyway. Um, like I told you before, my grandson is on his phone all the time watching videos about playing games. It seems a little strange to me because I'd rather be playing the games, but he would rather watch a video of somebody else playing the game so he can see how to do it. Um, doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but he's 10 years old. It makes a lot of sense as far as he's concerned. So when we're talking about psychotherapy, when we're talking about cinema therapy, what we're really talking about is just utilizing some of the things that they do anyway to try to help them, to guide them to watch uplifting movies or movies that show that they can get over whatever their current problem is. One of the things we're going to discover is the more severe your problem, the less likely that a film is going to make an impact on you. As a matter of fact, keeping people away from or not using cinema therapy with individuals with severe mental illness, psychoses, um, problems with reality. These individuals you're not going to help. It's the people that their problems aren't that severe that cinema therapy can really help. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to tackle chapter 1 and chapter 2 of the Hesley and Hesley text. The Hesley and Hesley text, as you probably have already noticed if you have a copy of it, is that it's mostly movies. And of course, the book was written in 2001, so most of the movies are over 20 years old that it talks about. Well, you can still use those movies. I have a hard time getting my wife to watch black and white films. So, if you can get your clients to watch an old movie, then that's great. But so a lot of the stuff in there is dated. Some of the stuff is fairly classical. I've what I have done is I have Googled movies about mental illness, and these are mostly movies that are more current. Um, as far as movies go, my son lived in Hollywood for 10 years, at least 10 years. He wanted to be an actor, so he was a cinephile. He was somebody who watched a lot of movies and he watched techniques and whatnot. He was only in a couple of movies and they were only bit parts. Mostly he was in movies that they cut his part out. But so this is something that I've been looking at for geez, when did he graduate from high school? Graduated from high school in 1990, and he was in Hollywood until the turn of the 21st century. So until 2001, I believe. Anyway, yeah, he's in. Well, I told you what he does. He's in government service working for one of the security agencies in Washington, D.C. Now, finally, after he decided that just because he's pretty doesn't mean that he can be an actor. So, a lot of the films that I'm not going to talk about these films. I'm just going to show you the, not the trailer, the, I can't think. Okay. Well, anyway, you'll see what I'm talking about. So let's go ahead and get started since I can't talk. Whoops, that's not right. All right. There we go. Okay. Chapter 1, Introduction to Cinema Therapy, and Chapter 2, Integrating Films into Therapy. This is something that you guys, of course, you're all children. You're all young. I call you children because I'm 72 years old. So in 1973, I graduated in college in 1971. So the first mobile phone wasn't available to anybody until 2 years after I graduated from college, and by 1973 I was in the military. We had radios that were about this size. I'll tell you what, that telephone right there, that Motorola, weighed about close to 5 pounds. It was heavy. It was really, really heavy. And as time went on, people got pagers. That was great. 1993 was another type of cell phone. 2004, the flip phone was invented. Then finally, in 2007, the flat phone became possible uh, because of some of the things that they were doing with the satellites and whatnot. And then, of course, 2021. Now you can have a fold-out tablet, I guess. The first handheld mobile phone was invented in 1973 by Motorola. Yeah, 1973. So if you watch an old movie from 1975 or so, you may see somebody with a phone like this, and you're probably asking yourself, what in the world has he got up to his ear? Cell phones became popular in the 90s and in the early 2000s. As wireless networks improved, especially between 3G and 4G, the technology shifted from cell phones to smartphones. So that's here. This is probably not a 2007 is probably not a smartphone. The first smartphones were a couple of years after this, but as soon as they changed from 3G to 4G, they it made smartphones possible. So today, yeah, as we're going to see, most people have smartphones. In 2014, 73% of teens reported having smartphones. In 2018, 95% of teens reported having access to smartphones or having smartphones. According to the same study, 45% of teens reported using the internet almost constantly. Almost constantly. This is my grandson. Ubiquity has taken place in the social science community, psychology especially, is years behind in dealing with the good, the bad, and the dangerous of this phenomenon. And this is the problem. The problem is we don't recognize the problem until it smacks us in the face. That's what happens. Very few textbooks out there. That's one of the reasons why I used the textbook that I did, social media and mental illness. It's about the only one out there. In the next 2 or 3 years, probably there will be more textbooks. I antagonize the company that publishes that textbook. So probably I won't be using that textbook in the future. They told me not to. What did I say? What's wrong with you people? Anyway, so films and therapy. Cinema therapy is a therapeutic process in which clients and therapists discuss themes and characters in popular films that relate to core issues of ongoing therapy. In cinema therapy, we use film to facilitate self-understanding, to introduce options for action plans, and to seed future therapeutic interventions. And this is Garden State, one of my son's favorite movies. Oh, this is the first one. Okay. It's a poster. That's the word I was trying to think of. Poster. This is the poster for Garden State. Natalie Portman and Zach Braff. I guess Zach Braff actually wrote this film. That's Ian Holm. I think it is. Well, maybe not. I don't know. I don't remember. Anyway, films are selected for both positive and negative associations. Some films dramatize possible solutions. Others show predictable outcomes if dysfunctional patterns remain unaltered. And I've never seen this movie. This is 13. It came out in the early 2000s. Evidently, it's about two 13-year-olds who become um, sexualized, and they start doing strange things, I guess. Like I said, I've never seen the movie. 13, it's happening too so fast. Okay. Anyway, so the whole point is that we use cinema therapy to dramatize possible solutions and to show predictable outcomes if dysfunctional patterns remain unaltered. And I'm guessing that's what 13 is about, dysfunctional patterns that remained unaltered. And so it showed negative things about them. Cinema therapy is one more strategy in attaining therapeutic objectives. It's not the main therapy. It's not the therapy that you're going to be using continually. Cinema therapy is therapy to augment the therapy that you're already doing. It presupposes that competent therapists will make use of the insights their clients garner from films. Films can influence behavior positively or negatively by choosing from an anthology of therapeutically useful films, assigning them strategically, and establishing boundaries for the viewing. The therapist can minimize the risks. And there are risks if you tell them to watch the wrong film, or if there is an extremely negative scene that makes them have flashbacks. I've never seen this movie either. The Perks of Being a Wallflower. He's the wallflower, and this is a brother and sister. I think they're stepbrother and stepsister, and he's gay, and she's really popular, and he's backward. So she decides that she's going to bring him out of his shell. I think that was the premise of this movie. A lot of these movies I looked I looked up. Yeah, and potentially if you're looking for somebody that's in a shell, or somebody who's having trouble coming out of the closet, then potentially this is a movie that you might use. The bottom line in any film, don't tell them to watch a film just because I said it was good, or just because you found it in the book, or just because somebody else said something about it. You need to watch it yourself. You need to make sure that there's no negative parts in the film, nothing negative. You need to find out what the negatives are in the film and what the positives are. And by doing that, of course, then you can, because you understand your client, you can suggest that he watch or she watch this film. A film offers a wide range of interpretations determined by the specific needs of a client, by the directions a clinician gives for viewing, and by the connections that a therapist helps a client draw. Films are occasionally assigned to reinforce an idea introduced in therapy sessions, but they're more often intended to encourage internal search and insight by the client. Of course, you watching the film, you get one thing out of it, but you need to project what your client is going to get. Now, he may get, or they may get a totally different message than you did, but you need to recognize the possibility of what these films can do. Building on the information in the films, it can augment your own therapy, and it can help your client. They can see a potential positive outcome from a problem that they may potentially have. If it's kind of a funny story. I think this kid checks himself into a mental hospital, and he meets Zach Galifianakis, and I guess he falls in love with her. I don't really remember. I read it a while back. I put this thing together a couple of weeks ago. Cinema therapy does not require a therapeutic discussion of every assigned film. Although discussions usually follow film assignments, some clients experience strong emotional reactions but do not wish to talk about the film. The storyline may have hit too close to home, or the connections with a character may be too revealing. Often these clients immediately suggest a new way to resolve a problem without verbalizing or even knowing what led to the new idea. We treat their insight as if it were unmediated. Further discussion of the movie would be counterproductive. In other words, don't talk about it. Don't talk about it because he doesn't the client doesn't really need you to talk about it. He's gotten what he's gotten out of the film, and they have moved to a new place in their therapy, and that's what you wanted to do. You really don't have to talk about the film. The King of Staten Island is about. I guess he's in his 30s and he lives at home and he's not really getting anything done, and he decides to become a fireman. So it's about someone who's trying to find themselves, and they're in their 30s. Everybody likes him, evidently. That's why he's the king of Staten Island. I've never really seen that one either. According to Bandura, this is Albert Bandura in 1969, the underlying assumption in assigning homework is that desired behaviors introduced in therapy sessions are practiced and mastered in a client's natural environment, leading to effective self-regulatory functions. Now, of course, when Bandura first came up with this concept of doing therapeutic homework, he was mostly talking about reading pamphlets and reading books. He wasn't really talking about films because in 1969, VCRs hadn't been invented yet. So you really had to go to a movie or watch it on television in order to see a film. And of course, it was kind of a hit and miss situation. But then, of course, VCRs were invented. Now we've got Hulu and HBO and Netflix. So we can. It's much easier now to assign homework therapy, to assign films as homework therapy. Therapists introduce concepts, assign homework that will reinforce key therapeutic points and process the exercise in a follow-up session. And Bandura said this works, and it does work with books and pamphlets. Here's a pamphlet. I want you to read this before you come in next week. You know, it's only 20 pages long, and then we will discuss what's in the pamphlet. That's normally the homework that he was talking about. Sometimes he was talking about books. He might assign this book, Aggression. Anyway, that was Albert Bandura. So he came up with this concept of doing homework. Albert Ellis was another individual that used a lot of homework for his clients. Film therapy, of course, is something that potentially can work just as well as reading a book. Homework helps therapy be more relevant to daily life. Though practice outside sessions, through practice outside sessions, the effects of therapy can be generalized throughout the client's environment. Therapists use homework assignments in which clients practice new skills or reintegrate old ones as a technique by which connections may be made between the special setting of the therapy and the client's life. Cinema therapy combines realism and imagination. Films are selected to resemble the situation of a client, but through associations, the client derives a wealth of material beyond the content of the film. But as clients watch films, they have internal conversations with the characters of a film. They reflect on the relationships they are viewing and thinking of actions they might take, similar or different from those of the character on the screen, to solve their own problems. I was really surprised when Encanto came out. My grandson loved it. He loved all the music in Encanto. But one of the interesting things about Encanto, is he here? He's not here in this picture. Where's Bruno? Bruno was a very questionable individual in the film. Everybody thought he was dead. Nobody talked about Bruno. This is very common in people's families, the fact that you have an individual that you don't talk about. You don't talk about the wife beater in your family. You don't talk about the guy that's in prison. You don't talk about the drug addict in your family. You know, this is very, and this struck me almost immediately when I was watching this with my grandson, despite the fact that the music is very catchy. And I speak a little bit of Spanish, and I was picking up on most of what they were talking about when they were speaking Spanish. But the whole point is, Encanto, it just swept the internet. People were saying, "Yeah, I watched this movie and I realized, what we were doing with the son in the attic, or the person we don't talk about, or things like that." In my family, it was I have a brother with PTSD pretty bad, and he stayed home most of the time, wouldn't socialize with anybody, and nobody talked about it. Nobody talked about him. And that's Encanto. A fascinating um, story. Part of the story was that the grandmother had so much control over everything that she wouldn't allow people to grow. She wouldn't let them be who they wanted to be. They had to be who they were forced to be by whatever magical powers they had. It's a fascinating cartoon. It's by Disney too. Really good movie, Encanto. Compliance, although not every client will watch each film assigned, most clients will give this new approach a chance. It takes them by surprise, usually, that they watch movies all the time. They watch, with one eye open and the other eye asleep. But if you tell them they need to watch this movie and watch this specific character, and you need to see what happens in this one scene, it really surprises them that it makes such an impact on them. I understand that this is a really good movie, Uncut Gems, and Adam Sandler does a really good job in it. I've never seen this one though. Accessibility, emotionally distraught clients may do better with film assignments than with books, whereas reading assignments require an ability to focus that depressed or anxious clients find difficult. Films require less concentrated attention. Adolescents, in particular, are almost always willing to watch a film, especially if it has Seth Rogen in it. So, if you're assigning books to people, if you're assigning pamphlets to people, and you're assigning them to people that are depressed or anxious, probably they're not going to get through it. They may get into the first chapter, but then they're going to put it down. They'll just put it down. How long does it take to read a book? Well, it all depends on how long the book is, of course. But a movie only lasts for a couple hours, maybe three if it's an epic. But it only lasts for 3 hours, and it's a lot easier for them to watch a film. Adolescents, of course, are always willing to watch a movie, especially if there's fart jokes in it. I'm just kidding. Well, no, I'm not. Not really. My 10-year-old son thinks that farts are funny. I haven't quite figured that one out yet. Yes, I can. 13-year-olds think that's really, really funny. Availability, movie watching can be shared by families even when other family members have not participated in the therapy. Um, Everybody sits down to watch Iron Man 3, and even though dad won't go to therapy, he still sees what happens in the movie. And of course, dad's a smart fella, so he picks up on exactly what he's supposed to pick up on. Curiosity, because the rationale for using films is carefully explained, cinema therapy assignments seem logical to clients. But the films that are picked are sufficiently removed from the problem at hand to potentiate clients' curiosity. This is a movie called Paper Towns, and it was a movie that came from a novel by John Green. I think that's his name. Anyway, one of my students at Dene College said, "Hey, this is the film he uh, talked about in 291 in Introduction to Counseling." He talked about this film and he made it sound so interesting that I got the book. And once I read the book, I read everything that John Green wrote. Really, it's the personally I like the book a lot better than the movie, but the movie is good. It's about this individual that runs away, and she leaves clues, and for this individual to find, at least that's what this individual thinks. Really fascinating book. Real fascinating. It's a really good book, and it's a pretty good movie. So, curiosity, yeah, that's important. Familiarity. Films are familiar, part of the vernacular of the client. Hence, they require no leap to a special language, sometimes encountered in structured homework. Sadly, of course, psychology is inundated with special words, and the more buzzwords that we use, the more we turn off our clients. So, but movies, of course, they don't have those strange words in them. So, so there you go. This is a movie with Kristen Wiig in it. Welcome to Me. She wins the lottery and decides that she's going to put on her own television show, and it's really kind of fascinating. I've never really seen the movie. I'm showing you films I've never seen. I have seen Paper Towns, though. That's a good movie. Rapport. Much of a client's life is outside the direct experience of the therapist. Films shared by clients and therapists deepen therapeutic alliance by providing an experience they have in common and by putting therapists and clients on more nearly level ground. And this is really a problem with therapists. Um, Clients don't have anything to do with the therapist outside of the office. But the reality is, and the client may think that the therapist is, driving a BMW and goes home to a castle every night and eats, I don't know, eats steak every night. Um, they have this misinterpretation. There's nothing in common with them. Who knows who the therapist is, but this at least gives them a common experience, a common language that they can use uh, to uh, to explore in therapy, which is not a bad idea. Offering hope and encouragement, no film can by itself reverse a negative worldview of a select individual. But the therapist can select films that begin in despair and end in triumph, thereby giving rise to hope. I didn't talk about the last film. Matchstick Men, evidently, this guy is a con man, and he's trying to get these people to work with him so that he can make a big score. I can't remember. He's obsessive compulsive. That was Nicolas Cage's character is obsessive compulsive, and actually Nicolas Cage is a bit obsessive compulsive as well. So it's the his obsessive compulsiveness and his pathological lying, which is really kind of fascinating, I guess, in the movie. And then the Skeleton Twins, they're married and they are not doing very well, so they take a trip together. I think that's it. Maybe they're stepbrother and stepsister. Well, I may be getting two movies mixed up. No film can be by itself reverse a negative worldview if somebody is that paranoid. But therapists can select films that begin in despair and end in triumph, thereby giving rise to hope. And I don't think this one ends up in triumph, but I may be incorrect. If anybody has seen it, you can tell me how wrong I am. Reframing problem, the problem that the individual has, the meaning that any event has depends upon the frame in which it is perceived. When the meaning changes, the person's responses and behaviors also change. In practice, reframing occurs when a therapist draws different conclusions about an event than what clients have concluded. And a lot of times, this is what happens when we are young. Something happens to us, and we put it in a certain, we interpret it in a certain way. Well, we're interpreting it with an immature mind. So, but it will stick with us the way that we interpret it as a child. So a lot of times what has to happen is it just needs to be reframed. The problem needs to be reframed. If we had this problem today, the problem you had in the past, then you would deal with it totally differently. And that's what a therapist will do. He will reframe the problems. They will reframe the problem for the client. Reframes startle clients and cause them to reconsider earlier judgments. When therapists introduce respectful new perspectives, reframes serve to weaken the dominance of an unchallenged meaning. The reformulations do not have to be profound. Modest reframes can lead to large therapeutic advances. And of course, this can be a problem. Yeah, my first wife left me because I'm ugly. Maybe she left me because she was immature. You know, we can immature we can immature. We can reframe these problems to make them more realistic for today. Providing role models, some clients reared in emotionally impoverished circumstances have few mentors or guides. They want a better life but have not met people who demonstrate qualities of behavior from which they can learn. Clinicians help such clients find mentors or may even serve the function themselves. But role models for the specific issues clients are facing may not be at hand. In those cases, film characters are useful substitutes, like in Rudy, where this undersized individual played football on the taxi squad for the practice squad at Notre Dame for 4 years. And then finally, in the last game, when he was a senior, he was given an opportunity to play the last play of the game, and he made a tackle, and the whole the whole team went crazy. They ran out on the field and carried him off the field. Identifying and reinforcing internal strengths. Many contemporary therapists focus more on identifying internal resources than on exploring client psychopathology, building on strength rather than weakness. Viewed from this perspective, clients are not dysfunctional so much as they are unaware of their assets and the means by which they can access them. And Silver Linings Playbook, if I remember correctly, I think both of these individuals have a mental illness, and they get together and they have to work through all of their. They have the same color eyes. Isn't that interesting? I wonder if they really do. Anyway. Identifying and reinforcing internal strengths, the therapy helps clients recall forgotten or discounted resources and then facilitates opportunities for those resources to be applied. Films assist in reaching that objective by portraying fictional characters who resolve difficult problems, often with no personal skills than those possessed by the clients themselves. How does the leap from real life to real life take place? Usually through conversation in therapy. And that is one of the reasons why you talk about the films that you have assigned. This, of course, is Black Swan. This is Natalie Portman, is the lead ballerina, prima ballerina in Swan Lake, and she is only able to be a perfect ballerina by this individual forcing her and abusing her, and that's what the crack's all about. So it's about what price success, I guess. I've never really seen Swan Lake, or I've seen Swan Lake, but I've never seen Black Swan. Oh, I'm not doing very well, am I? Most of these films I've never seen. Potentiating emotion. Films trigger emotions and open doors that might otherwise be closed. It is one thing to talk about a problem and quite another to feel it, particularly for clients who intellectualize. Viewing a film that elicits emotion and connecting the film to personal situation enhances therapeutic conversations. and it should. And it makes it a little bit easier because you're dealing with the problem, but it's displaced a little bit. And the reason it's displaced is because you're not talking about your problem. You're talking about the problem you saw in the movie. But the reality is, you have the same problem that they were dealing with in the movie. So despite the fact it's a lot easier to talk about Winona Ryder's problem or Angelina Jolie's problem in Girl Interrupted than it is to talk about your own problem. Improving communications, clinicians attempt to help clients communicate unfamiliar concepts to their partners. But a film can introduce understanding through readily grasped images. Lars and the Real Girl, this is really kind of an interesting movie. He's really shy. He lives in a small town. Everybody knows him. Everybody loves him, and um, he decides that his new girlfriend is a blow-up doll. And so I guess he carries this thing around. I've never actually seen this movie. That's Ryan Gosling. Everybody thinks he's pretty, but I read I read about it. If anybody's seen this, you can tell me about it. Prioritizing values, while Hollywood does not attempt to philosophically challenge the great philosophies or religions, social critics agree that popular films constitute one of the primary sources for the dissemination of cultural values in our time. And this is a question I asked in cultural psychology. Where do we get our ideas about dating, about dealing with our problems? Where do we get our culture? And the answer is a lot of it comes from the movies that we watch. Even if the movies are about New York or Los Angeles or Field of Dreams is about a cornfield 30 miles north of here. Um, it still shows us what cultural values the movie producers think that we're supposed to have, and it really does do that. So cultural values are something that are imparted by films. The Dream Team. I've actually seen this movie. These are all men in from a mental institution. They all have interesting problems. He's obsessive compulsive. I think he has borderline personality disorder, and he can't. Uh, uh, he overdoes everything. I can't remember what the other two guys. They're probably Peter Boyle and Stephen First, what their problems are. But his wife is getting a divorce or getting married, and he's trying to break up the marriage. So he steals a truck. They all four of them break out of the and the psychiatrist that's in charge of them gets in trouble somehow. Anyway, they break out to try to find the doctor and break up this guy's marriage of his ex-wife. And it's really it's a comedy, and it's really kind of interesting, kind of an interesting movie. In the end, everything turns out for the best. What therapists need for cinema therapy? Therapists should learn to watch films therapeutically so they can describe the process effectively to their clients. Therapists should assemble a list of therapeutic films. Therapists should think of films as co-therapists in the process of encouraging and utilizing insights. So you have a list of films for depression, say for depression. Some of those films aren't going to fit every client. As a matter of fact, they only may fit one or two clients. But the reality is that you need to be aware of what's in those films. So you need to watch these films, and you need to watch them from a therapeutic point of view. What will my client get from this? What negatives can my client potentially take from this? And that's the way you need to watch it, and that's what you need to catalog when you are assembling a list of movies. As Good as It Gets has Jack Nicholson, Helen Hunt, and Greg Kinnear in it. He's obsessive compulsive, and he falls in love with Helen Hunt's character. And Greg Kinnear is a gay man that lives next door to Jack Nicholson's character. He gets beat up and he needs somebody to help take care of him. And since Jack Nicholson is right next door, Cuba Gooding Jr. Intimidates Jack Nicholson into helping take care of Greg Kinnear, even though because of his obnoxious personality and obsessive compulsive disorder, he denigrates gay men. It's really kind of a fascinating movie. He's got this strange fascination for Helen Hunt, who is a waitress in the only restaurant that he will eat at, mainly because he goes there because of her, to see her. And of course, he's fairly obnoxious. He's constantly obnoxious, says very inappropriate things. Really fascinating movie. Lots of negatives. Cinema therapy, but lots of positives too. Cinema therapy concentrates on characters and their relationships. Critical in cinema therapy is the process of change in and between characters. Clients are asked to pay attention to how characters appear at the beginning, how they react to the conflicts they face, and how they are different at the end of the film. Clients should note how relationships improve to deteriorate or deteriorate through the film, what each character does to make things better or worse, and how the character appears to feel in response to the change. I've never seen this movie either, but I understand it's very good. Virgin Suicides. And I don't remember what they said about it. In cinema therapy, the client is encouraged to articulate their identifications, which characters elicit the most and least personal identity, what behaviors would the client like to adopt, how are the issues similar to the client's own issues, is a character's approach to problem solving like the client's, what feelings does a client associate with a character? Are those feelings familiar? This, of course, is Good Will Hunting. This is Matt Damon's first movie. It had Robin Williams and, of course, Matt Damon. Ben Affleck was in it. That was his friend. His potential girlfriend was Minnie Driver. And it turns out Matt Dillon is Will is a genius. He has a huge IQ, but he was abused as a child, and so he has anger issues, and nobody could figure out what's going on. He's got this massive intellect, but nobody can deal with him because he keeps getting in fights. So they take him to all these therapists, and nobody works. And then they take him to a therapist that's more like him. He's a Southie. He's from South Boston. So he's able to understand where he's coming from. And throughout the movie, they make a connection. And eventually, of course, Matt Damon, Will, his character in the movie, discloses where his anger comes from. And at that point, he can move on with his life. Really good movie. Clients are asked to consider the film's unique voice. How does the film's voice differ from the client's families or friends, and what new perspectives do they hear? What is the new message? What action does the film encourage? How viable are the ideas in the film? If these ideas are potentially useful, how can the client put them into practice? If the ideas are impractical, can they be modified to work for the client? Wristcutters, a love story, is really kind of fascinating. This is a movie about people that commit suicide moving into a purgatory. And the purgatory is just like everything, except nothing ever happens. It's just like everyday life, but nothing ever happens. So there are select rules that you have to follow if you're in this form of purgatory. This individual, something happens to him. He falls out a window or something, and he gets taken to this Purgatory, and this is Shannon Sossamon. She's another character in the movie. And eventually, of course, well, it's really kind of an interesting idea. This idea that people that commit suicide move into a purgatory, and of course the love stories between Patrick Fugit and Shannon Sossamon. Anyway, kind of an interesting movie. I've never seen it. I thought it sounded so interesting. I tried to find it on cable, but I couldn't. I'd have to rent it, and I'm too cheap to rent it. Making your own film list. Almost any film the client likes can be used productively in therapy, but only if the therapist treats a client's preferences with respect and enters into the exercise with a sense of curiosity about why the client picked that film. Lots of films I won't watch, but if I were doing film therapy and I had a client that said, you gotta watch Friday the 13th, the 8th episode or whatever. Yeah, if it has a message for him, there's got to be something in there that is the reason why he's watching that movie. So the client's preferences are extremely important as far as film therapy is concerned. Films are very specific to each individual. Their interpretation, they have to interpret what they want, and they take what is in their life and they watch the movie and they get out of it whatever uh, has happened to them. That's how they interpret the movie. This is really important to therapy. This can be really important to therapy, and for this reason, you need to be very to use the client's perspective and to use the client's preferences as far as the films that you choose. It may be completely away from anything that you would want to watch, but the reality is that this film says something to your client. And for that reason, you need to listen to their preferences and respect what preferences they have. One of the reasons why I haven't watched a lot of these movies is because these aren't the kind of movies that I like to watch. Um, but if I were doing cinema therapy, of course, then I would watch whatever my clients are watching, so that I could judge what possible therapeutic advances can be made by watching this film. Therapists should think of films as material that will be internalized by clients and available for future reference. Clients remember characters from films and can repeat key phrases and sequences long into the future. And my son does this. My son, like I said, he's a cinephile. He likes movies and he watches movies and he memorizes dialogue because once upon a time he wanted to be an actor, but he still does that. He'll watch a television show ad nauseum. Every time I go visit my son, we watch something. We watched It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Oh, geez, we must have watched everything. We watched The Office one time. He shows me movies. Wait a minute. What's a movie that I had to see? And they always turn out good. Oh, Garden State is one of them. Is one of the movies that I had to see, and he was right. It was just a really good movie. That and the fact that I really think that Natalie Portman's a good actress. And there are other movies that he has shown me that really were fabulous, and there was a good message in them that I would never have watched on my own. My daughter wanted me to watch The Usual Suspects, and of course, normally I don't like crime movies. I don't like mafia movies, but that was a really good movie. The fact that the character was lying throughout the whole thing, and he had the police inspector just completely befuddled by the end, since he was Kaiser Soze. The purpose in using film is to augment therapy, and that's one of the things that you need to remember. I've said it before. Um, the films aren't therapy themselves, but they are there to augment therapy. If you just say, watch this movie and then never talk to the client again, it's not going to work. It needs to augment what you're doing in therapy. The therapist should not feel obligated to return to discussion of a film merely because it was assigned or because they are curious about the client's interpretations. Although several films can speak to a clinical problem, therapists will find a greater comfort in working with certain films rather than others. American Psycho, I don't think I would use that in therapy. Well, hopefully you won't have a client that this is that this speaks to. Clients who are functioning moderately well in their home and work or school environments and whose problems involve interpersonal components are ideal candidates for cinema therapy. Films can be used with individuals, couples, families, adults, adolescents, and some pre-adolescents. So the bottom line is, as long as they're moderately functional, then probably it's going to help them. But there are some caveats to that. There are some people that need to stay away from film therapy. I can remember when The Breakfast Club came out. We were living in California at the time, and we watched the movie, and I thought it was just excellent. The way that they presented all these individuals who had one problem, but they all got together and helped cure each other's problems. And by the end, of course, by the end of the movie, everybody moves away from their problems. They were taking on an identity that wasn't really them, that somebody else put on them. It's really kind of fascinating. Breakfast Club. Films should not be used with small children except in family therapy as a means of encouraging the family to do something positive together. Given a child's developmental limitations and our practice of discussing films a week after they are assigned, using cinema therapy with young children is usually not very effective because they forget and because they have developmental limitations. Their minds aren't mature enough. Turning Red, I found to be a really fascinating movie. My son watched this over and over again one weekend. There's a lot of messages in Turning Red, and I thought, well, Turning Red's kind of interesting. It's like coming out of the closet if you're gay. That's the message that I got when she turned into the big red panda. I was thinking, is she really, is this a message about difficulty dealing with something that you can't talk to people about? And of course, the first thing that came to my mind was coming out of the closet if you are LGBTQ2 plus. Anyway, I just thought that was really kind of interesting. My grandson watched this movie, and then I took him to he had a birthday party on Sunday, so he watched this movie Friday night. He watched it, two or three times. Saturday, got all the songs down. Then he went to a birthday party on Sunday. It was really kind of fascinating because there was a lot of pent up anger in this movie. When I tried to get him to come home, he yelled at me, and he's never yelled at me before. Um, and I don't know if it had anything to do with the movie or if that was a message he got out of the movie. Really kind of interesting. He apologized later. Clients with serious psychiatric disorders are not candidates for cinema therapy. So what do we have? We have young children, and we have clients with serious psychiatric disorders. Because clients usually view films in their own homes rather than the office, it is difficult to deal with issues that come up during or immediately after viewing. And a lot of times, individuals with serious psychiatric disorders, it's an immediate reaction, and it needs to be dealt with immediately. The risk is too great to assign cinema therapy to clients who have trouble distinguishing reality from fantasy. But the risk is true as well for non-psychotic clients with severe symptomology. Therapists should not assign films that they believe in their clinical judgment might cause a client distress. But one thing that you need to stay away from. Okay, so we have young children, we have people with severe psychiatric disorders, we have people who can't distinguish between reality and fantasy. Now that includes people that are suffering from a psychosis, but it also may refer to an individual who has gaming addiction or, well, gaming addiction. Clients may not know when a film will be helpful, but they almost always know when it will be too hard to take. When clients are more vulnerable, describe the film in far more depth than the client who are more resilient and less emotionally distraught. Cinema therapy assignments are very successful. Oh, I didn't even talk about this one. I don't know anything about Still Alice. Oh, she's suffering from early onset dementia. And she's trying to decide. Did I talk about Kevin? We need to talk about Kevin. And I didn't talk about Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind. Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind, he doesn't have a firm grasp on reality. This is Jim Carrey's character. And he falls in love with the Kate Winslet character. And I just read the synopsis, so I'm not really exactly sure what happens next. I just read the synopsis of We Need to Talk About Kevin. Kevin evidently has anger issues and is fairly psychotic, but Tilda Swinton is his mother, and she has a difficult time letting go. He obviously needs some kind of treatment, but she doesn't want to let go. Still Alice, as I said, she has early onset dementia, and it is the family struggling to deal with keeping her in the home. Cinema therapy assignments are very successful with couples. However, if there is violence in the home, film assignments should not be used. Films should not be assigned to clients who have had recent traumatic experiences similar to the characters in the film. The number 23 is another Jim Carrey movie. Jim Carrey's character becomes fascinated with the number 23 and becomes obsessed and it becomes pathological for him, the number 23. So what do we have? Cinema therapy assignments. Work with couples, except no violence in the home. If there's violence in the home, it may trigger violence between the couple. If a therapist thinks that a certain character in a film fits the client in ways that will be offensive, the therapist should not assign the film. If the client expresses a dislike of films in the intake interview, cinema therapy should not be used. And I don't really remember Split. Since cinema therapy was developed, negative reactions to films assigned by therapists have been rare. Usually what happens if the individual starts having a negative reaction to the film or the film's not saying anything to them, they just turn it off. So that's one of the reasons why there are very few negative reactions to films. They just say, no, it's crap, so I turned it off. Didn't like it. Saw the first 15 minutes and turned it off. The worst case scenario appears to be that clients indicate that a film seems off target and irrelevant to their needs. Usually a second film assignment will prove more successful, especially if the second film is chosen by the client. And there you go. And I've never seen Benny and June. Evidently I don't remember. This is Johnny Depp. He kind of irritates me when he's not Captain Jack Sparrow. Anyway, so there's very little risk. Usually the client just turns the damn thing off. Makes sense. In a client's choice of movies, the therapist can find clues to their working role models, the ideal self image, the internal resources, the potential goals, the perceived obstacles, the degrees of imagination and creativity, and the overall philosophy of life. And this is The Notebook, which I've never seen. Karen, have you ever seen The Notebook? Uh, you read the book? Okay. Well, I don't know anything about the movie. Evidently, wait a minute. Gina Rowlands is old and she's dying, and she's in a nursing home. And James Garner is her husband, and he keeps reading from a notebook that talks about their how they fell in love and who they were when they were young and in love. Um, and that's Ryan Gosling and Rachel McAdams are the two young James Garner and Gina Rowlands. Anyway, that's the movie, and in the end, well, I'm not going to tell you the end of it, but it's it's them interacting as young lovers. I guess they almost didn't get together. Anyway, so when you are watching a movie, or when your client tells you about a movie that they've seen, or you're talking about movies that they like to watch, this gives you a real good picture of who they are and what it is that they're looking for. Do they have any role models? Do they watch select movies? Do they watch a lot of DC superhero movies? Do they watch rom-coms like I do? Um, how do they see themselves? A lot of times you can judge how they really see themselves from the movies that they watch. Um, what is their overall philosophy in life? Is it positive? Is it negative? You can judge all of this from talking to them about movies. Not a bad idea. You gotta get in to figure out who they are in one way or another, and this is a good way to do it. Anyway, so next week we'll talk about. I think we're done. Yeah. Next week we'll talk about cinema therapy, more cinema therapy. One of the things that I'm going to ask you to do this week is I know I went through a lot of movies. There's 42 slides, and there's at least 40 movies here. Well, maybe 40 movies. If a lot of these movies I've never seen, I don't usually watch psychological movies. So what I'm going to ask you to do is you can either talk about a movie that well, anyway, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to if I've really screwed up the description of any of these movies, I'd like you to talk about them. Talk about the movies that are here. And the reason I'm saying that is because the textbook Hesley and Hesley gives you a synopsis of a lot of these films, a lot of films, but not these films, a lot of films, because Hesley and Hesley wasn't printed until 2001. So most of the films in there are fairly dated. These are much newer films. So why don't you find a film that you want to talk about and go ahead and talk about that film? Now, I don't know if you've noticed or not, but if you answer the discussion question, I've been giving you 10 points. You've got to write. You got to give me something. Um, and if you have been doing an article critique, I've been giving you 11 points. And if you're doing a movie synopsis, I've been giving you 12 points. Well, this week I'm going to give everybody 12 points if you do a movie. It doesn't really matter which one you do. I know everybody's going to give me Fight Club. No, I don't know. Anyway, if you give me a movie this week, one of them in here, it'll help me next year, the next time I teach this class, because I probably won't watch these movies. The only one I really want to watch is what was the one? One about suicide. I've seen Dream Team, and I've seen As Good as It Gets. Ah, there it is. Risk Cutters. Risk Cutters, a love story. That's probably the only one that looks really that interesting to me. Some of these movies I've seen, and there was a cartoon, Inside Out. I've watched Inside Out. It's about a young lady's losing. She starts to get depressed. Her happy self disappears, and the depressed self takes over. It's another Disney Pixar movie. I didn't talk about that. I'm sorry about that. I didn't talk about the Joker either. I've never seen the Joker. Um, but since Heath Ledger was was in a Batman movie and played the Joker, this has become a recurring theme. Evidently, this is a good movie. It's got Joaquin Phoenix in it as the Joker, but I've never seen that movie. Anyway, okay, so just give me a breakdown of a movie. Uh, maybe you can watch a movie that you haven't seen yet. If you don't have access to them, and that's one of the reasons I didn't assign you movies to watch and do a synopsis on them, is because you guys don't have the same access to movies that I have. Or maybe you don't have electricity. I mean, that's a possibility. But we have cable, and I think we have Netflix and HBO and Amazon Prime. Anyway, so that gives me access to some of these movies, but evidently not Risk Hunter's A Love Story. Maybe I'll rent it. Anyway, so that's what I want you to do, and I'll write that up for the third week. The discussion question is to give me a synopsis of one of the films in the lecture. Okay, okay. I'll talk to you guys next week. Turn this thing off. There we go.